Hello, all. It's Rich Straffolino here. We're going to get started with the Gestalt IT Rundown in just one moment. I have the big boss man, Stephen Foskett, joining me. So if you are watching live, thank you so much. If you're watching later, I still thank you, but I'm not thanking you for watching live because that would factually be inaccurate. Unless you watched it live and are watching it later, in which case you're a super fan. So double thank you for you. Stephen, are you excited to be on the show today?
I cannot express the
You literally cannot express.
I literally cannot express.
I like that. I like that this show is baffling to you and confounding.
Which certainly is.
Which has really been my goal in creating it this entire time. So what do you say we get started and we talk about some IT news, huh?
I think that's what we're here for.
Yay! So let's play some music that people may or may not be able to hear on the live stream. Let's go. Hello all and welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown, your weekly look at the IT news of the week. I'm your host, Rich Straffolino. I'm an editor here with Gestalt IT. Joining me from across not a great distance is the one, the only, Stephen Foskett. Stephen, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks, Rich. It's good to be here. Indeed, I could almost hear you if these walls weren't so solid and well built.
If these walls had ears, it would probably be a very distracting place to work because it would be horrific.
Yes.
Truly. One thing that's not horrific, though, is the first story I wanted to talk about with you, and that is the closure of the acquisition of Carbon Black by VMware. They announced that they completed that acquisition for $2.6 billion, or what I like to call bags and bags of cash. VMware has been a bit of an acquisition spree lately, but how big is this deal, Stephen, in that they're adding this endpoint security element to their already expansive portfolio? What do you think the natural integrations with this are?
Yeah, this was a really interesting one because it was announced just before VMworld, and I was lucky enough to be able to go to VMworld and also to be on the analyst track at VMworld, which meant that I got some time in the sort of the analyst discussions with Pat Gelsinger and Michael Dell about the justification for this. And I mean, I'll just tell you, so they bought basically Pivotal and Carbon Black at the same time. I think a lot of people were kind of equating the two and thinking, you know, two acquisitions. You know, I think they're very different acquisitions, though. I mean, this is like, you know, buying a house and a boat at the same time. You know, A, you can do that, but B, they're very different things. And, you know, Carbon Black, I don't know, is that the house or the boat? Well, we'll see what you think metaphorically. Basically, you know, Pat sees security as something that's broken and something that VMware can fix. And so he was very, very specific about that with us at VMworld. And it has been in the past as well. I mean, he mentioned last year that security was something that was broken and he'd like to fix. And then this year he said, security's broken and I just brought Carbon Black.
So and that will fix it.
I don't think it's going to fix it. In fact, he didn't even say that. He said that this was going to go some of the way, right? That VMware is going to try to use this technology to do for security what the hypervisor did for servers or what, you know, NSX has done for networking. And that's cool. I hope it works. We'll see.
Well, and that's always to me been kind of the subtext of a lot of the NSX discussions is that security, you know, that kind of, you know, security is broken and we're going to give you the visibility and kind of the configuration to be able to fix that a little bit. I mean, NSX is such a huge thing that it's hard to pin down any one particular element with that. But at least in like watching a lot of the Tech Field Day content, that always seems to be kind of like the unspoken element of that. Is it a big deal that this is endpoint specific? And do you think that's going to be a new focus for, or an increased focus for VMware going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, they were unequivocal about that they see the endpoint and edge computing and 5G as a major expansion and major opportunity for VMware in the enterprise. And so, yeah, absolutely. This is not only a big entree into the security market for VMware, but it's also a big entree into the endpoint computing market, which they've already been a player in.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah.
If you had said AI, we would have officially had buzzword bingo if we counted the free square there. So
yeah, you know, they're going to use a little AI with some IoT and, you know, maybe some Kubernetes and container orchestration to solve business, blah, 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 blah. Okay.
Well, let's see if we can get some more buzzword bingo here, because there's some news out of Puppet. They announced the public beta of Project Nebula. I love betas that are just projects because it makes people think that they're not actually products, which hopes to bring the principles of configuration management automation to a cloud-native deployment model. Project Nebula lets devs set up workflows that query an overall existing state before making any changes to cloud-native continuous development. It supports over 20 cloud-native dev tools, including Terraform, CloudFormation, Helm, Kube Control, and Customize, and comes with a startup example. It comes with a couple startup example workflows to kind of get you started, as well as some advanced visualization tools to kind of see where everything's at a high level. This definitely makes sense in terms of Puppet kind of bringing their approach to this cloud-native continuous development. But how important is this as a new market for Puppet here, Stephen?
Yeah, well, Puppet's already kind of a darling among, a lot of those folks. So I'm not sure how much of a new market it is, but I think it's a great idea. Certainly web development and, cloud development, not web development, cloud application development hasn't had the same kind of, boring, rigorous blah as regular enterprise applications. And things like this are bringing the blah to cloud development. And I think that that's actually a good move for them. I think I'll just tell you one thing, that the people who use it just love Puppet. And so I absolutely feel like this is going to be a good move for them. Obviously, if you're developing a new app, where's it going to live? It's going to be a cloud app.
Yeah, and but to your point, I think we know a couple of kind of industry darlings that haven't quite been able to translate that into long-term success. So I think this is definitely smart to bring that puppetized approach that again has endeared a lot of infrastructure folks into that cloud-native space. Makes sense. It can also win. I mean, obviously that's a huge market, probably bigger than their existing one, if they can capitalize on that. Going forward, it will remain to be seen if it stays as a darling or becomes, like you said, a blah boring thing that, oh, by the way, everyone happens to use and makes Puppet a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, that wouldn't be so bad, would it?
I mean, certainly not. If you work for Puppet or are a shareholder privately, they're not public, right? Yeah. All right, up next here, we have ARM announcing the custom instructions feature, allowing embedded systems on a chip designers to add unique application-specific features to Cortex-M CPUs without risking overall software fragmentation, so kind of without breaking the basic ARM infrastructure there. The free standard feature will arrive in mid-2020s to ARM Cortex-M33 CPUs and going forward. The standard is designed to allow better allow for co-processors with integration, useful for adding things like ML and AI workloads that everyone wants to do on their ARM processors. Is this ARM opening the door to our semi-custom silicon future, Stephen?
Well, I think that's what they're trying to do. Whether it succeeds or not is a different question. I mean, to me, this looks an awful lot like ARM trying to figure out how to answer the fact that big ARM users are building their own cores, adding their own instructions, kind of fragmenting the ecosystem. I think the interesting aspect of this is the way that they're doing it preserves backward compatibility. They're making sure that these CPUs aren't going to be like hyper custom ARM CPUs, that they just implement one or two new instructions that this or that company needs. Definitely, I think that it's a reaction to the fact that you're seeing more and more ARM licensees wanting to have their own CPU. Also, I think there's a big IoT angle here in that a lot of IoT devices are trying to do things like in-camera ML image processing and things like that. And I think that these instructions will help with that as well. So to me, it looks, I don't want to say that this is an amazing new path forward. It looks like ARM is doing a thing that will keep them competitive in the market.
Yeah, and the reason I framed it with the semi-custom kind of element to that is I think that's a really emerging theme that we're seeing in late 2019. I mean, obviously going forward, but there was recently, and more on the consumer focused side, we saw Microsoft basically announce 2 semi-custom chips that they're going to be putting in stuff. But we've also seen in AMD's data center EPYC things that they're bringing in things that were developed for their semi-custom gaming chips on an encryption side into their mainstream data center products. And to me, it seems like, because we're kind of slowing down on that x86, kind of Moore's law, we're either going to get more power efficient or we're going to get more powerful year over year over year, that it's causing this kind of push into the semi-custom approach to get those efficiency gains that people are looking for. And I think this is just, kind of another example of that. And if you're interested in more thoughts on that, there may be a video coming out about that later this week on Gestalt IT.
Indeed. And I got to say, you actually mentioned that earlier as well. You did a nice little video last week about Docker. So
yeah. So speaking of industry darlings, next up here, Facebook announced that Workplace by Facebook, the thing that I personally hope I never have to use, now has 3 million paid users, up 1 million in the past 8 months. So just since February. While not directly comparable, let's put this into context where we are with this kind of workplace communication software suite. Microsoft Teams has 13 million daily active users as of their last reporting just a month or two ago. Slack has 10 million daily active users. Now, those aren't directly comparable to paid users, especially in the Slack instance. They just kind of lump everybody together with that. If you look at, they break out the number of paid teams that are on there, but that's like a much lower number because there are a ton of users on each individual team. At Facebook's Flow conference, the company added a bunch of new features to Workplace for Facebook to kind of sweeten the pot there. There's going to be a Workplace portal app for video calls that will also integrate with consumer portal devices, perhaps hinting that an enterprise portal will be coming at some point. Automatic video captioning for posted content for internal posted stuff, so you can have a video there and automatically have ML-generated captions. I think they just flipped a switch and brought that over from the consumer side. Peer-to-peer video broadcasting for internal content to kind of save on bandwidth, which I thought was really interesting. Sentiment analysis in analytics. This won't break down if individual posts, if you put a smiley face in your Facebook workplace post or something like that, it's not going to say, hey, Rich is really happy at work today. It does broad overall trends, doesn't break it down by individual users because, hey, Facebook, don't be creepy. And dedicated new post types for learning content, so for continuing education, and thank yous to employees. Given that Facebook doesn't need to have Workplace to be doesn't need it for Workplace to be profitable, especially for a company compared to Slack, anytime soon. Are we impressed by these growth numbers, Stephen? And I think for a lot of people, Workplace for Facebook was an afterthought. Seems to be gaining some traction a little bit here.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, for one thing, I've never talked to anyone who likes Facebook Workplace. And I've talked to a few people who use it, but I preface that by saying that. The other thing, Rich, is we've decided to move to Facebook Workplace, and you're going to need to use it from now.
Yeah.
No, actually, honestly, I mean, Facebook Workplace is obviously horrible, but one thing about it that I actually really like, and I think that this is linking into these growth numbers and this story, is that it's an obviously horrible product, but it's also a useful product for companies that have lots and lots of employees all over the place who aren't like desk kind of employees, like let's say Domino's Pizza or somebody like that. Now I don't know that they're a Facebook Workplace user, but somebody like that would get this solution, to roll it out to like 100,000 employees and use it as a way to connect with those employees, kind of like as an HR intranet, and like a modern day horrible internet. And all the intranets were always awful, so this one will be awful but familiar. And I just. There is an angle, and it's an interesting angle, and okay. And the fact that they gained like 1 million users in a year means that this is what's happening, because I can't see anybody signing up for this on purpose. But if somebody, some big giant company needs like, hey, we're a, health insurance, we're a hospital, we're a whatever, we need all of our employees to be able to access a thing and get access to some information, and we need to push stuff out to them and implement things like chat and messaging and kind of, pseudo email. This is a way to do it. So it's not horrible. It's just horrible.
Well, I mean, if you've ever been a part of like an Outlook bulletin board situation, like that is its own like portal to hell, hashtag hell portal that you've already been a part of, at some point if you're working for a company. But I think to your point, Stephen, Facebook recognizes that, and they've introduced it kind of separate tiers for front of house employees. And I know Starbucks is one of their bigger clients that they have announced as Workplace by Facebook partners or whatever, and they have a ton of front of house employees, right, where they can be on a much less expensive tier. You still get those people on it. They can still get access to all this continuing education. You can still get that sentiment analysis, but there are going to be people that are going to be quite as engaged as someone that's sitting in a cube farm and as someone that would be using Slack or something like that, but could still benefit from, again, having that kind of, yeah, you're absolutely right, HR, intranet kind of feel to it. And maybe this isn't necessarily like a Slack competitor, but maybe taking some of the functionality that you get from a solution like for a human resource provider like ADP or something like that.
Yeah, that's how I see it. And from that aspect, honestly, it's good.
Well, and people are already kind of trained on how to use Facebook. I know the interface is slightly different, but it still has that newsfeed functionality. It's still like you're posting stuff, there's a newsfeed, there's little apps on the side. So people already kind of know how to use it, as opposed to introducing, kind of the visual cacophony and unique terminology of something. Even like Microsoft Teams, especially Slack, can be a little bit opaque when you first get started with it. So, having that familiarity of interface, having people that don't necessarily need to be on it in the same way that people with Slack could be, I can see the appeal, not that I find it appealing in any way, like you were saying.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah. So
yay. Next up here, speaking of things that I want no part of, or that people want no part of, PayPal announced it's withdrawing from the Libra Association, Facebook's cryptocurrency initiative. The company said it supported Libra's aspirations and will continue to partner with Facebook in the future, but will focus on its mission to democratize access to financial services for underserved population. Bloomberg subsequently reported that U.S. Senators Sherrod Brown and Brian Schatz sent a letter to MasterCard, Visa, and Stripe to consider the global financial impact and effect on their own businesses of being part of the Libra Association, which doesn't sound threatening at all to those companies. I thought it would be interesting here, when I first saw that story about PayPal leaving, if they would still hit their announced 2020 release date for Libra, in light of having direct pressure from U.S. senators sent to specific companies. Do we think that Libra is just not going to happen now, Stephen? Oh, I think Stephen might have frozen up on us. That's okay. Yeah, I'm very, very skeptical about where we will see Libra going in the future. I don't think there is, I don't know, it seems like there is just a total dearth of goodwill for this. Even among Facebook partners, there seems to be a lot of cooling off of enthusiasm. Remember, these are people that have pledged to provide some financial support and host a node for the Libra blockchain, but I haven't actually committed to anything now, which is why a company like PayPal can get out of it there. If we're getting big companies like MasterCard and Visa, getting getting pressure from the government to kind of back out of that, could be a major problem from them going forward. Stephen, we're talking about PayPal leaving Libra and MasterCard, Visa, and Stripe getting pressure from U.S. senators to maybe reconsider their association with Libra. We think Libra is going to happen in 2020 at all?
I just want to note, I just had some technical difficulties. I think maybe Facebook heard what I said about Workspace. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are coming through loud and clear.
Okay, great. Yeah, so honestly, the Libra thing just was so puzzling to me. Like, why would Facebook jump into this? I mean, honestly, I can see why, because we take over the entire world. But I mean, other than that, do we need Facebook to do this? I think it's going to collapse. I think this is going to go nowhere, and I think it'll be another. What was the name of their phone thing? And who cares?
It's the Microsoft kin of cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, I don't think it's going anywhere. I feel like this is just meh.
Well, I feel like a lot of these partners got on board as like a just in case, like, listen, it only costs us $10 million to get on the ground floor of this. If it takes off, it's better for us to have a voice on this association than not. And now all of a sudden they're getting all this pressure and being like, yeah, this is way too rich for our blood. We're getting out of this ASAP. Not surprising to see people kind of taking off from there. Very interesting that no banks were ever announced as members of the Libra Association and really didn't want any part of this, probably because they do have the compliance just complete cluster that they were walking into. So it's still Facebook. There's still a huge giant company. There's still a lot of big names out there. My money says something called Libra is released at some point, but it is far back from any kind of vision that they initially had.
Yeah, that's I'm with that. Sorry, guys, you're not WeChat.
All right, and last up here, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear a decision or refused to hear an appeal from Domino's upholding a lower court decision that the Americans with Disabilities Act applied to websites as well as brick and mortar stores. The Act guarantees that those with disabilities have full and equal enjoyment of the goods and services of any place of public accommodations. Since the court refused to hear the appeal, another case could later be taken on by the court to set a precedent in this case. So it's not exactly closed as if they had actually made a decision in this case. Stephen, looking at this, this has a feeling of something kind of akin to GDPR, where there's going to be this giant short-term scramble for everybody to be in compliance, no one kind of knowing what the ground rules are, especially since this is a judicial act, not an act of legislation. I mean, say what you will about GDPR, at least that was an act of law. Yes, it had to be enacted by all the European states, which had its own huge layers of complication. Being a judicial precedent, though, it doesn't exactly set a bunch of milestones for success other than be in compliance or not be in compliance. But eventually, do you see this getting us to a place where we probably already should have been in the first place?
Well, I think that first, let me just say that, access for disabled people is something that really ought to be part of the fabric of the internet. And, assistive devices have come to such a long way now, and protocols and standards for access are at the point where there's really, I mean, it's really kind of disagreeable that a company like Domino's, with literally millions of customers all over the world, wouldn't be compliant with that sort of thing. But that being said, there's a few aspects here. I mean, number one, like you mentioned, this is a court ruling, not a law. I mean, it's applying a law, which is, of course, I guess what courts do. But anyway, it's a court ruling, and similarly to a lot of the things, in the U.S. at least, it's difficult to get laws passed these days. In these partisan times, people just aren't passing legislation that would, force websites to be, ADA compliant. That's not likely to get through the House and the Senate and signed by whoever. At this point, honestly, it's just the courts are the only way to do it. And of course, this was not even a court ruling. This was a court not ruling in a way. This was the Supreme saying, yeah, no, we're not going to even argue that. So I guess that's how things get done these days. But that being said, I think the real interesting factor is what you just mentioned about, akin to GDPR. It really is interesting because if you think about it, so if Domino's has to do this in order to be compliant with the ADA, then that means that they have to do this everywhere for everyone and everything. And does that mean that everywhere, everyone and everything has to do this? Does that mean that, suddenly everyone's going to have to be ADA compliant? Does that mean your website has to be and mine? That's a really good question. And I think that this absolutely could explode in that way. I mean, I think it would be honestly, I agree with this ruling that, if you're blind, you should be able to access Domino's. I mean, that's what the ADA is all about. But should you be able to access the New York Times? Probably. Should you be able to access Joe's Sub Shop downtown? Should you be able to read Gestalt IT? So there's a slippery slope here, and there's definitely shades of gray. And I do see this spilling over. Absolutely. I mean, well, for one thing, I mean, Pizza Hut had better get on it. But, for another thing, I mean, everybody else, I'm sorry, Pizza Hut, maybe you're already ADA compliant. But, everybody else, I think, better start looking at it as well, especially retailers. But even, other sites, might have to start thinking about this and thinking about how crappy every site is that I use. I'm not optimistic that that's going to happen.
Well, and I would be interested to hear from someone that has some visual impairments, what their experience is using the web, because I think when we think about this, we think about, oh, this is someone that's 100% blind and doesn't have access to this. But the reality is that the vast majority, I don't want to say the vast majority, there is a huge number of people that have some sort of visual or auditory or some loss of those senses. That could theoretically take advantage of something like this. I mean, how many people do you know that watch every single thing on, Netflix with the captions on or something, or something like that? It's incredibly common. I mean, it's incredibly common across all kinds of videos. And I think we're seeing on a platform level, I think Apple for a while has had a lead in terms of accessibility tech, but Microsoft has made a concerted effort over the past couple of years across a wide variety of products to really address that need. So where the responsibility lies with, hey, our website's going to be accessible on a platform that has accessibility tools, what the argument there is versus making the website itself regardless of the platform, accessible. I think there's a little bit of wiggle room there that could cause some headaches, both for users and for companies down the road. But it will probably lead to subsequent court rulings, and that may eventually find its way to the Supreme Court. But we will see. But definitely, I think will impact for sure the retail and any place that has some kind of retail footprint online needs to definitely take this into account for sure.
Yep, absolutely. And all I'll say is that I want RSS feed compliance to be signed into law so that all websites have a freaking RSS feed.
I think you need to take that to the Supreme Court, Stephen, and we will be there with you at the courthouse when we do, but it won't be today because we have reached the end of the Gestalt IT Rundown. Stephen, thank you so much for being here. This was a blast. Where can people find more of your great stuff on the cyberspace?
Well, the easiest way to find me is just look at S. Foskett on the Twitters. You can also find me here on gestaltit.com and the Gestalt IT Facebook page. You can find this little guy. Oh, sorry. Which side is he? Here. This little guy.
Yes, there we go.
Office sheet on the Twitters as well. He's been spying on me. And we look forward to seeing folks tuning in as well for some of the Tech Field Day things going on. We're going to be broadcasting live on Monday from Commvault Go and on and on.
Excellent. If you want to find me, you can find me at Mr. Anthropology. That's MR Anthropology on the Twitters. You can find me my writing at Gestalt IT. And hey, while you're at it, why don't you subscribe to the Gestalt IT YouTube channel to search for Gestalt IT on YouTube. We're having some new video, kind of putting up these video editorials I've been doing every Friday here. And like I kind of teased during the show, I'm going to be talking about maybe the rise of semi-custom silicon and the decline of general purpose computing going forward. So check that out. They'll be coming out this Friday. But Stephen, thank you once again. We'll be back next Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, running down the IT news of the week. Until then, for myself, for Stephen Foskett, for all of us here at the Gestalt IT family, here's wishing you and yours to have a super sparkly day.